Well, hey everybody, John Rethlin here with a retro review of TNA Slammiversary 2009. Yes, I showed you guys that to prove that you guys aren't going insane. I am reviewing another TNA event. Yes, I know it's called Impact Wrestling, but I'm calling it what it was back then. And I did review Lockdown 2009 a couple months ago, but mainly for the newer subscribers, or for some people that may have forgotten, I actually, for a period of years, but especially from 04 to 09, even though I have seen the stuff from the very first show, all the way up to 2009, even for a few years after that. I'm not able to keep up on the current Impact Wrestling simply due to time constraints, and there are a few people I simply will not watch on that program. But I wish them nothing but the best. I wish the Knockouts division the best, and so many others the best, as I want that company to be viable. I want it to get some good revenue streams and all that stuff, but another story for another day. The reason I'm reviewing this is I wanted to see how the show held up. Because especially from 04 to 09, I enjoyed the Impact Wrestling product, the TNA product, the weekly TV, and the pay-per-views, even though there were some messes and everything, and, some goofiness, and some feuds that didn't work for me. You're going to get that with any wrestling company. Big ones like WWE, when Ring of Honor had their, had their momentum going and everything, when a whole bunch, with any wrestling company, you're going to have that happen. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, that if I'm dogging any of this stuff, it's because I'm looking at it and remembering, oh yeah, what I did and didn't enjoy about this show. Seeing the stuff held up that I really, really enjoyed. And I'm going to warn you guys right now that I'm going to rant a little bit during this. Now, I'm going to praise quite a bit of it, because the first, the fourth, the sixth, and the seventh matches, so 4 matches out of the 7 were good to great. I will say that much. So more often than not, they hit out of the park here. Which is ironic because they had some Detroit Tigers there, and this was at the Palace at Auburn Hills, which the crowd, I don't think it was all filled, but I think it was 4,000 to 5,000 people, so they probably got a pretty good crowd in there, and the crowd was pretty loud for what it was. But one thing I do want to say is they had Don West and Mike Tenay, and this is a few months after they had turned Don West heel as a heel commentator, and I hated that because, one, I always loved Don West, just as an enthusiastic, guy, yeah, he didn't know a ton about wrestling, but he got to where he loved it. And yeah, some people dog Don West and Mike Tenay as, they were all smarky and marky and everything, and, smarky smark and the funky bunch. But they were all just a bunch of smarks on commentary. And I hate using that term, but that's how a lot of people describe them. Mike Tenay knew a lot about wrestling. Don West got to where he knew quite a bit about wrestling and had enthusiasm. So them as a face commentating team, I didn't mind. Don West is just too damn likable, and making him heel did not fucking work. So that is one down portion of this show. When he was just calling moves, it was fine. Him trying to be a heel didn't necessarily work. They had a song by Goldilocks, which, if you remember her, she was a TNA original back in their early weekly pay-per-view days, and even for the very early days of Fox Sports Net, I don't think she was around too long. I think she was around for a couple of years though. She actually wasn't that bad. It was a song called Take It Out on You, and they had the song. This is a weird thing that TNA did with their DVDs at the time. They would play the entire theme before you could get to the pay-per-view menu, or the DVD menu, which was really weird. And then they played the exact same video package once you started it up. And I will say this, when I ordered it on pay-per-view, I got my money's worth. I was very, very happy. And all good. So we start with, we had video packages and stuff like that throughout the night, but you had Suicide, and I don't remember if Suicide was Christopher Daniels or Kazarian. I know Kazarian was injured at one point. I think he might have come back for this, because he looked a little bigger. I know that him or Daniels played him at the time, and Daniels had a match in the next match, so I don't know if they would have had him work twice, even though they had him do that at Lockdown. But anyway, it's Suicide, Alex Shelley, Chris Sabin, Jay Lethal, and Consequences Creed, who would later become, of course, Xavier Woods. And his next division title, King of the Mountain match. Now, I did every King of the Mountain match rank from worst to best video at some point. I'll put a countdown list at the end of this that I really enjoyed looking back on, even though some of them have aged well. Some of them, even from a couple years ago, have not aged so well. Now, obviously, since Shelley and Sabin were the Motor City Machine Guns, were the current IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Champions at the time, they were teaming up, and so was Jay Lethal and Consequences Creed. This wasn't bad, but the crowd was already starting to sour on the Suicide character. They came from a fucking video game, by the way. came from the storyline of the only TNA video game, at least as of the recording of this video. Even though I can't see current Impact Wrestling getting a video game, it wouldn't be that bad. I would just be interested to see what platforms would carry it. Now, the idea of King of the Mountain, to go over very, very briefly what the rules are. Apologies for a little bit, of me stumbling over my words, allergies and all that. But King of the Mountain, there's a penalty box at ringside. It's like a reverse ladder match. You have to pin somebody to become eligible to climb the ladder with the title and hang it up on a hook, and then you win. So if you try to climb up the ladder and hang the title, you can't unless you pin somebody. And whoever's pinned has to go to the penalty box for 2 minutes. It sounds complicated. Sometimes it actually worked. Now, there were times it actually didn't. I don't know who came up with the King of the Mountain match concept. Who knows? I don't have a fucking clue. So, Suicide actually dominated for a bit. He pinned a couple people. He got pinned, So everybody becomes eligible eventually, and then things pick up. Sabin runs up a ladder set up in the corner, dives out the penalty box onto Lethal and Creed. And then Sabin let Shelley pin him to become eligible. That was kind of cool. And then Shelley hit his knee at one point. This was a really bad bump where he hit his knee after falling off the ladder. It looked like he really hurt himself. I believe it was knee or neck problems that led to him retiring eventually. I'm not totally sure. Maybe he just wanted to retire, but I remember him in earlier interviews talking about neck and knee injuries, especially necks, talking about like the 6-sided ring and landing badly because it was built differently and some parts were harder. Like, a sliced bread from Alex Shelley to Consequences Creed on the apron, as we know, the hardest part of the ring. Because Suicide cut her off the ladder, or just off the penalty box, getting Shelley off the ladder. I believe it was Shelley or Sabin. Eventually, Suicide climbs up there. The crowd's booing, but he hangs the title up and he wins. So, a fine opening match. Went pretty damn long, though. We got to about 35 minutes in before, we got to the second match. And then they were doing backstage interviews. And there was a blonde named Lauren, and I don't remember her name. I remember thinking she was really beautiful, and I thought she at least had some enthusiasm and everything, but I don't remember her name. And yeah, we had a Shane Douglas interview. Shane Douglas had recently returned to Impact Wrestling. Shane Douglas, who had no goddamn business in the ring in 2009. And look, I know he was one of the guys who put ECW on the map. He beat his body up to shit. Paul owed him a whole lot of money. Paul screwed him out of a whole lot of money. I will say that. I'm not debating that. He was great for ECW. He was even great in earlier WCW when he was in a lot of tag teams. Him and Steamboat were one of my favorite tag teams of all time. That was in 92. Shane shouldn't have even been in the goddamn ring in 1999 in WCW. And he was. And they had this, setting up the whole thing. They had Douglas attack Christopher Daniels because Christopher Daniels had lost his job in Impact and then got a second chance and won it back. I don't remember what the whole deal with that was. But anyway, so Daniels there, and then Shane Douglas attacks him. Shane Douglas, who I know had been doing other jobs. I think he was like a teacher, working at Target. Hey, he was earning an honest living. Nothing against that at all. He shouldn't have been in the fucking ring because this was bad. This was really bad. So it's Douglas versus Daniels. And whoever wins stays in Impact. It's called a second chance match. And they should have done a retake of this or something. They should have saved this for Impact and retaped it because I'm sorry. Shane hurt his ankle or something. You hurt his ankle, you hurt his leg. Now look, he wasn't in prime shape. That's going to happen. But it hampered a match that was already pretty much just on one leg at this point. He did focus on Daniels' arm, but fortunately, BME soon after, 1, 2, 3, and thank fucking Christ Christopher Daniels wins. This match was, I would call it atrocious, but no, atrocious comes a little bit later, which I feel bad about. We get a Mick Foley interview. They're really hyping up this whole thing of the Impact Wrestling, the TNA Heavyweight Championship, King of the Mountain ladder match, and Foley's like, well, I threw a big bash for Jeff Jarrett on a recent episode of Impact. He's in my pocket. I'm in his pocket. I'm going to retain the title, and he's going to help me. There's a lot of babbling. Oh, by the way, and Foley was TNA champion in 2009. That's why it was a bit hard for me to take the main event scene seriously in Impact when they kept relying on guys, who should have not been in the ring. And I would have said the same thing if Foley was in the ring, in WWE ring in 2009. He shouldn't have been in the ring any goddamn more. They need to rely on the young guys, and unfortunately, after a while, it kind of bit him in the ass. And bit a lot of companies in the ass. It's biting WWE in the ass right now, just to be really, really brief. It's biting them in the ass real hard because now nobody means anything there. But then we get the Knockouts match. Tara, Victoria, who I love. I mean, not just because of that banner. She's great. I loved her when she first debuted. Came back as a wrestler and faced off against Trish Stratus in that great feud. I love the match she had against Molly Holly at WrestleMania 20. She did every goddamn thing she could. Victoria should have been in the Royal Rumble, the Women's Royal Rumble this year. And I think 2019 is going to be her final year. Active year, at least, in the ring. It's a shame, but hey, good for her if she wants to go out, the way she wants. So her name's Tara here. And she's facing off against Angelina Love, who's got Velvet Sky and Madison Rayne. Madison Rayne I got nothing against. Put Madison Rayne off to the side here. I thought Madison Rayne was a pretty good worker. I still think she's a good worker, whether in Impact, whether in Ring of Honor, wherever she goes. She was in Mae Young Classic 2, Electric Boogaloo, and she may, who knows, if she doesn't stay with Impact, she might go to AEW. Who the fuck knows? She is really good. Angelina, she's okay. But the problem is you got Angelina and Velvet doing the beautiful people shtick here. Nothing has fucking changed in 20 years. Feels like 20 years. 10 goddamn years. And then you got Velvet. By the way, this is for the Knockouts title. They made Tara look like a goddamn joke here. And I mean, and just on the off chance that any of the women are watching this. Look, you're taking more bumps than I ever have. So I'm certainly not going to say that, I'm an athlete. No, I'm not a goddamn athlete. I've watched enough wrestling, though, to know when people know what the fuck they're doing. And all Velvet Sky ever could do was hump the ropes. That's the only move she could ever do properly in the ring. Hump the ropes. And then hump certain wrestlers to stay employed. That's the only fucking reason she stayed around so goddamn long. Because she was nowhere as Talia Madison, even though they brought her in 2007. She had like a couple Sunday Night Heat appearances in 2005. I think even faced Victoria on one. So look, Velvet may be really, really nice. I'm sure she is. And I'm certainly not saying that she deserved a lot of the hatred that she got at a recent Ring of Honor show. Even though something that a guy said, the only reason that she's there is because of who she's screwing, that's not wrong. It's not the only reason, but it's probably a big reason. Because what does Velvet Sky add to a wrestling ring in 2019? Nothing. She doesn't add anything. And she drugged this goddamn match down. Of course but then again, they show her humping the rope. I never understood the appeal of Velvet Sky. And if any Velvet Sky fans are watching this and you got a problem with it, okay, I'm just a wrestling fan with my opinions. You guys can be fans of her all you fucking want. But seriously, she was with Chris Sabin for a while and then got with Bully Ray. And it's funny that all of a sudden the only reason she's there has to be because of him. Because she never got any better in the ring. She actually got worse in the ring as time went along. I don't know if it was injuries or what. I'm certain that she beat her body up. I don't know how, since I never saw her take any really goddamn hard bumps. Except on the ropes, of course. She just was, and yes, it sounds like I'm essentially burying Velvet. I'm burying her as a worker, not as a person. She just was fucking rotten. She really was fucking rotten, and Tara deserved better. The number games ended up beating Tara, and she got hairspray in the face. No, not copies of the movie Hairspray. They might have actually improved things, actually. But yeah, no, Tara lost. Welcome to TNA, Tara. To be fair, she actually had a better match later in the year. She actually faced off against Awesome Kong in a cage match in like November of 2009. Actually a pretty good match. But yeah. Velvet drug it down. Madison did what she could. Madison was the better worker of the three, clearly. I mean, Madison, Angelina wasn't awful. She just shouldn't be wrestling now. And Velvet could never wrestle. And then we get a Dr. Stevie interview with that interviewer, Lauren, and then Raven and Daphne. Always liked Daphne. I always thought Daphne may have not been the best worker in the world, and she didn't need to be, but the Scream Queen, that kind, not the TV show, she was pretty goddamn good. And it's hyped for their Monster Balls match. Monster Balls match actually would be better. Raven and Daphne versus Abyss and Taylor Wilde. Whatever the fuck happened to Taylor Wilde? She had a career and then she left, I think, to do psychological studies or improve her standing by, doing more psychological studies and getting out of the ring. And good for her. Taylor Wilde was a hell of a worker, though. She really, really was. See, now I'm going to get back to where I'm praising the women because they actually did some good shit here. Daphne did some good shit. This was during the time where Stevie Richards, Dr. Stevie, was trying to get through to Abyss. He was a therapist, and it neutered Stevie Richards and all the good stuff he could do in a ring at that time. And he did his best. He really did his best here. And thank God he wore clothes under the lab coat because we certainly didn't want to see that. I kid. I like Stevie Richards. I actually think he seems like a pretty genuine guy. And is somebody that I think still could perform well in the ring, even at this age. I don't even know if he still wrestles anymore, but I thought Stevie Richards kind of got a raw deal in WWE, even though he was there for a while. I like the right to censor thing, but it's a monsters ball match, monster balls. I'm just going to call it that. And it was a mixed tag match. It was what it was. Of course, the weapons got out. Daphne got tossed by Abyss over the top. Taylor does a nice dive. We go out in the crowd, so the men face off with the men, women face off with the women. Taylor Wilds, smashes Daphne through a table. You quit being dirty, folks. I run a clean show here. I say as I essentially just buried Velvet a couple minutes ago. But we get Dr. Stevie interfering, Abyss bleeding, cut. Shocking that Abyss is bleeding. Good on Abyss for becoming a producer or an agent or whatever the role is in WWE. Good on him. Same with Sanjay Dutt. Good on Abyss. I thought he used weapons a little bit too much. The guy really was TNA Impact Wrestling through and through. He could have left in 06. He didn't. He went back. He stuck to his guns and he kept working for him. And now he's earning his money at the end of his career. Good for him. Well, I think he's actually officially retired from the ring. But still, he really, I respect Abyss. And I respect Sanjay Dutt also. But we then get, trash can to Dr. Stevie. We then get Daphne, getting thrown through the tacks by Taylor Wilde. Black Hole Slam onto the tacks. And Raven gets pinned 1, 2, 3. It was a decent match. It wasn't great. But this was, I'm sorry, and I hate to say a match with Tara was bad. It wasn't bad because of her. It was bad because of the fact that some of the women there, well, 2 of the women, not Madison, it just drug. It just didn't do any favors for anybody. The numbers game, all that stuff, it didn't do any good. This is how you use the women, and I thought Taylor and Daphne did pretty well. Raven, who had gotten his thyroid condition under control, was, because that's apparently part of the reason why he gained so much weight, and good on him for gaining it under control. But this is when Abyss still had something going to him, or something going with his character. It's just a shame Taylor Wilde retired, as I thought she could have contributed even more to wrestling, but hey, she chose, that's fine. We then get a Jeff Jarrett interview, and he's talking about Foley as a champion, but it's a weird line that's almost, it's almost like prophesizing. He says, I need to take back control of the company. It's like, if I don't take control of my company, who knows what brick wall we're heading into. Unfortunately, he wasn't wrong, because he got sent home soon after this when it turned out that he was dating Karen Angle, not Karen Jarrett, since they're married. They got married months later or years later. Who the fuck cares? Good for them. Karen Jarrett, can't stand her. Fucking bitch. And she was. She never belonged in wrestling. You want to talk about a woman that never belonged in wrestling. Karen Jarrett never fucking belonged there. Only got there by, her and Velvet have a lot in common. Sleeping with the right guys and then moving up into a position of power. I wonder why people essentially bury what I say because they think that I'm sexist when I'm just an equal opportunity offender. Because Jeff Jarrett I never really respected either. He was never a world champion. He was a mid-card guy at best, even though he could draw some houses somewhere. But anyway, it was kind of a weird prophecy, line that the prophecy kind of came true because they headed into a brick wall when they hired Hulk Hogan. And then we get Matt Morgan versus Sting. If Matt Morgan wins, he gets Sting's main event Mafia spot. The main event Mafia, by the way, was Booker T, Sting, Kurt Angle, Scott Steiner, Kevin Nash. What do those guys have in common? Besides probably being a bit past their prime at that point. Angle I was a little worried about. Even though he was still really good and had a long career in Impact. Longer than he had in WWE, by the way. Still a little worried about the guy. Sting was pretty much past his prime by that point, even though he still had a couple years left. Booker was paid vacation. Scott Steiner and Nash tore his quad probably while I mentioned his name. but they're all world champions. So if Matt Morgan beats Sting, then he gets his spot, despite not being a former world champion. Now, I love Matt Morgan and thought he got a Raw deal on Impact, but that was a bit stupid. It also guaranteed that Sting was going to win. Sting won. It was sloppy. It was not very good. Matt Morgan had some moments. It was mostly sloppy, and he lost. Great job building the young talent there, and I love Sting, but it just wasn't good. Then we get a Styles and Joe interview, and Styles and Joe talking about how they're going to take back control of the company and everything, and Joe says, "We will become the most dominant force tonight." We. No, not they, because I was Bound for Glory 2010. Yes, I remember that. Oh boy, do I remember that. But this, he alluded to the fact, he didn't say, when he said we, didn't mean him and Styles, by the way. This is where I'm going to, do a little bit of a rant at the end. It's going to be a little longer retro review than normal. But we get Team 3D versus Beer Money. This was a really good TNA tag title match. This was really good. These teams always worked well together. Beer Money and America's Most Wanted are my two favorite TNA tag teams of all time. Well, Motor City Machine Gun, so it's like those three. Still, Team 3D is further down because even though they were good and I thought they had a good run for a number of years there, it's Beer Money, America's Most Wanted, Motor City Machine Guns, and you get interchange all those. One of the big X factors of those was James Storm. James Storm, to me, one of the best tag team wrestlers ever. Now, he's a good singles wrestler also. I'm not trying to discredit the fact that he can't wrestle in singles. And again, I'm pretty certain no wrestlers are watching this. If any wrestlers watch my content, I appreciate it, but really, you must have more time on your hands than I expect. Unless you're just looking for a different opinion on wrestling, then I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody for watching my channel. This was good tag work. It was well done until the British Invasion came down, which was Magnus at the time, now Nick Aldis, Doug Williams, who I believe has retired, and Rob Terry, who they tried pushing. Rob Terry, who I'm sure is a nice guy, but it didn't work. He was good for what he was. They tried to present him as something different. They tried to present him as, more of a wrestler, and he was more of just a power guy. Once it got to where they were on commentary, Rob Terry blocking the view of people in front row, so I'm sure they enjoyed spending money for those front row tickets. And it's not against Rob, it's against where people placed him. That interference, that happened. Bully dives onto Magnus and Rob, poor Magnus and Rob, and then Williams gets thrown through a table. But then the DWI, drinking while investing. That's a good name for a finisher. Beer Money wins. That was good stuff. We get an Angle interview then. The match was actually good for what it was. Once British Invasion got involved, I didn't think they were needed, even though I got the point they had hyped up the whole thing where Team 3D had attacked the British Invasion or stopped them from attacking others on a recent episode of Impact. So I got why they were there. I just didn't think the match needed them. British Invasion could have hit the ring afterwards. Beer Money could have gotten a clean win over Team 3D, and it would have worked. Who knows what the reasons were. I just didn't think that it needed to be that way. But it was what it was. We then get Mick Foley, Kurt Angle, Jeff Jarrett, Samoa Joe, and AJ Styles TNA title King of the Mountain match. There were 15 motherfucking minutes dedicated to them walking from the backstage area, including AJ Styles wearing the hood and everything, not being able to see a goddamn thing. Samoa Joe wearing a black towel and having the weird penis tattoo thing on his face. The Nation of Violence, not a very good use of Samoa Joe. And it would get worse by the end of this. It sounds like I'm really shitting on this pay-per-view, and I actually enjoyed quite a bit of it. It just, some of the booking wasn't really all that good. Even though I got what they were trying to do at the end. I'll get to that in a minute. But the video packages, okay, they hyped up every single thing. They made it seem like a big main event. The problem is, 15 minutes. They didn't need to do 15 minutes of that. They could have included another match. They could have given a few minutes to the knockouts. Maybe not. They could have given a few more minutes. I don't know what they could have given a few more minutes to, but they could have maybe included another match instead, had some more knockouts, have like a knockouts tag team match, something. Because at this point, this is where the show dragged. Now, making a main event seem big is fine. In any company, I don't care who the fuck it is. If they're doing this, they're trying to fill time. They probably should have just put another women's match on the card. Maybe I don't know, like right after Matt Morgan and Sting. Hey, ladies, you know, the guys kind of stunk up the joint there, so go out and save the show. Because the Knockouts division did save the shows for quite a while. Even though pay-per-view wise, sometimes they weren't given the best amount of time, and they sure as fuck weren't paid all that well, and that's a pretty big, shit fest right there. The women should have been paid a whole lot better. But back to this match. Joe attacks Angle before the match has started. And Joe's wearing a Detroit Red Wings jersey because they're in Detroit, or Palace Auburn Hills. I mean, well, they're in Detroit. Anyway, so then because Kurt Angle's wearing a Pittsburgh Penguins jersey. Hockey. It's hockey, and they have a rivalry, in case you guys don't know. I know enough about hockey to know Detroit fans and Pittsburgh fans hate each other for the most part. I don't think any of them want the other to die, but it's a big sports rivalry. So the whole point is Joe attacks Angle and keeps beating him down, and they get sent to the penalty box before the match has started. And Angle's automatically eligible. See, right there, it factors into the finish. The finish is absolute shit. So yeah, we then get Foley stalling. He tries to let Jarrett pin him. He lets Jarrett pin him, so then, because Foley's like, oh, Jeff Jarrett will help me win the title. Or if Jarrett wins the title, then I win the title. If that's not how it works, I think all those concussions are starting to get to Foley. Joe chokes out Foley. He's eligible. Joe uses a ladder. Foley knocks the ladder over, and Joe lands on it later. Oh, fuck. That looked pretty brutal. Joe throws Foley into a ladder. Guitar shot to Kurt. It seemed like things were going pretty good. There was a nice elbow off the top of the penalty box by Foley on the Angle. The Foley didn't quite clear, and you could tell because Angle was fucking clutching his ribs. It looked like it was painful. It looked like Joe was going to win because he had hit a dive. He knocked out Styles. He gets up there. He gets up there with the title. Kurt's up on the ladder, and Joe goes and hands him the title. Samoa Joe, who should have been feuding with the Main Event Mafia, leading the Originals against the Main Event Mafia, joins them. Now, it made sense in the sense that Joe was a former TNA champion. And sure, it was a swerve, bro, but it killed Samoa Joe. At least for the time being. He was never, and actually, I would argue he really wasn't worth much of anything after that. He was tag team champions with Magnus. I think he was a champion one more time. I think he might have been X Division champion again when they brought back the no limit, the no weight limits thing, because they had a weight limit on for a while, which drug it down. And gee, I wonder why that didn't work. That was the thing about the X Division. That was what was great about it. Not about weight limits, about no limits. This was not a good end. It was not a good end to a show. I'm not going to do a grade normally, or I normally don't grade retro reviews. I would say C+ for this. There were elements of great, but there were a lot of elements of shit, and I don't think they had the best showcasing for the women in the Knockouts title match. Even though I love Tara, I thought she did fine. It was like having to carry 2 sacks of wet concrete, while Madison Rayne at least knew what the fuck she was doing even back then. And she's only become more of a polished performer, while Velvet continues to polish other things. But moving on from that, the show had its elements of great. It also had its elements of shit. So that's where I'm going to leave that review off. So I'm pretty certain I'm going to get hate in the comments and whatever. I'm not saying that anybody can't be fans of the people that I railed against. But it's my opinion. It's my rant. It's my channel. I'm not saying anything. I'm certainly not saying things that weren't, that aren't, as bad as other stuff that have been said. So that's all I'm going to say right there. Making absolutely no goddamn sense, like I always do. But anyway, agree, disagree with what I said. Like, share, subscribe. Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I will see you soon.